Okay, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Kathleen Suddies. I'm the chair for the Sunshine Coast Community Forest Board of Directors. And I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening for our annual general meeting. I'd like to, just a quick housekeeping, we will have question and answer at the end of the AGM, but we are also going to make available question and answer after the audited financial presentation, which allows any of questions to be dealt with by our auditor so that he doesn't have to remain too long. So on that note, I would like to call the meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. And today is, of course, May the 8th, 2023. I would at this time like to introduce the directors and our Sunshine Coast Community Forest. Some of us are here in the audience, and also our District of Seashell reps. We have Councillor Donna Bell, and we also have Adam Shepherd joining us. So I would ask for a motion, please, to adopt the agenda. Make a motion, thank you.
Sorry, make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Thank you. And Donna, to be so moved? Seconder? A second? Thank you. Okay. Thank you. And I would also ask for a motion to receive and approve the annual general meeting minutes that were dated April 25th, 2022. So those would have been the minutes from last year's AGM.
The minutes of the annual general meeting of the corporation dated April 25, 2022 be received and approved.
Thank you. And seconded and so moved. At this time, I'd like to invite Richard from Crowe McKay to make his presentation for us on their audited financials.
So the financial statements are being presented on the screen. Again, my name is Richard Wilson. I'm one of the partners at Crowe McKay LLP, a local accounting firm, and we are the independent auditors of the corporation. If you want to go down to the audit report itself, I'll just make a couple of comments on that before we actually look at the financial statements. We able to go down? There we go. One more page. So the audit report itself is dated on April 21st, 2023. That was the date that the board of directors of the corporation approved the financial statements. And so these are being presented today at the AGM. The financial statements, of course, as well as the notes and the system of internal controls that results in the accounting records are ultimately the responsibility of board and management. Our job as an independent auditor is to audit the financial statements and then render our opinion. And so our opinion is in the audit report that these financial statements are free of material misstatement, which is what you want. So jumping ahead then to the next page. 2 pages. There we go. Oh, back one. Great. This is the statement of comprehensive income. So the total logging revenues are there at 2.1 million compared to 2.8 in the previous year. The cost of sales and the margin is reported there as well. Gross margin of 1.28 million compared to 1.26 in the previous year. Total expenses of $634,000 compared to $369,000 in the previous year. And that does include, of course, community engagement and community donations and some of the other strategic initiatives that the corporation has, as well as regular operating expenses. The income before other item is the $649,000 compared to the $898 in the previous year. The interest and other income is pretty much all interest income, but there is a little bit of other miscellaneous income in there as well. So you get the total net income and comprehensive income, as well as the earnings per share. On the next page, This is a continuity of the equity, basically showing the opening equity as well as the net income for the year, and then the dividends paid. And so towards the bottom right corner of that, the dividends that were actually paid out in 2022 were the 525,890. The 25,890 is a 15% of the share capital, which was an annual dividend amount that was put in place quite a while ago. $500,000 was the extraordinary dividend for the year that was paid out to the district of Sechelt, who is the shareholder of the corporation. The next page then is the first page of the statement of financial position. So this is the snapshot of where the organization was at the end of the year. And so on a line by line basis, you can see that there are very similar types of assets overall, cash in the bank, as well as receivables from sales of logs, as well as inventory, which is logs that haven't been sold yet, and then prepaid operational costs, as well as some office equipment and other forestry equipment that the corporation owns. The next page is the second half of the statement of financial position, and this is the liabilities and total equity. Starting at the bottom of the page, you can see that the total equity and retained earnings of the corporation is the $2.1 million that was carried over from the statement of retained earnings, as well as the original share capital that the district of Sechelt put in, and the contributed surplus, which was some grant money that also seeded the original operations of the organization. In terms of the liabilities, again, on a line by line basis, there's relatively similar, save for this year, there is some deferred revenue which related to a grant that the corporation received. Some of that money was spent in 2022, the remainder will be spent in 2023. And so the unspent amount of that amount received is deferred and will become revenue next year. The corporation, of course, has some significant accrued liabilities, both for road deactivation and silviculture. And there's both a current portion and a long-term portion. Current portion simply being the planned expenditures on those particular activities in the next 12 months, so 2023. The next page. And this will be, I'll just make a quick comment on the notes. This is the statement of cash flows. And so this really just recasts the year from a cash perspective, looking at the inflows and outflows of cash. And so what this shows was overall a positive influx of cash from the basic operations of $228,000. And then the uses of cash, which of course predominantly were the $525,000 in dividends that were paid out. So as a result of the larger dividend in 2022, there was a net overall decrease in the amount of cash of $327,000. And that resulted in the ending cash balance of just over 1.5 million. The notes to the financial statements are super exciting. And I'm going to read them all word. No, I'm not. They are an important part of the financial statements. The notes to the financial statements provide information on the accounting policies that are used, as well as more detail on some of the financial statement line items, but I'll probably keep the presentation just to the primary financials if that's okay. So those are the 2022 financial statements, but I'm happy to take any questions that I can answer.
Just a couple of quick questions on the expenses.
Sure.
And I apologize if I'm asking questions that are actually in the notes, but with regard to the board and committee expenses, that increased quite a bit. Sorry, could you just give me a bit of detail on why it went from 16,700 to 36,795?
Well, I can tell you what the numbers are, and then I don't know if Sarah or somebody would want to comment on that, but the board and director costs were 21,000 compared to 15 in the previous year, but there was education and training of 15,000 versus basically nothing in the previous year. So that was the bulk of the increase. If you wanted to.
In the previous year, we budgeted additionally for board of director costs. There was some discussion with the board at that time about paying director stipends. And the board decided not to do that, but in lieu to pursue additional opportunities for directors that would give them the information they need to make good decisions and also enrich the experience of being a director. And so that included, there was a silviculture committee workshop that many of our directors attended. And other similar type training opportunities. In addition to that, the previous year, there was still fewer in-person events because of COVID. And so part of it was also, if you look back historically, the prior year was a low year as a point of reference.
Okay. Just again, under expenses, the community engagement amount obviously increased quite a bit. So if you could just give me a quick breakdown of the major parts of that.
Over to you again.
Thank you. Yes. So again, that was an area that we budgeted significantly more this year in order to undertake some transformation that was identified and needed the previous year that is also encapsulated in our strategic plan. Specifically the spending in 2022, the significant items were that we engaged third-party professionals on a contract for 6 or 7 months of work for us. We also underwent or embarked on a communications campaign in both the Coast Reporter, the radio, and on social media. That also included some support for preparing the material that went into that. We also started to attend events. There were a number of events, over half a dozen for sure. So we had to make some upfront investments there as far as purchasing a tent, tables, some printed materials, stickers and that kind of thing, so that when we went to events, we had some information that people could take and walk away with, and we could show up presentable. That's primarily the community engagement expense. I do have notes to the financial statements that are a little more detailed that were provided to the board of directors and are a matter of public record that I could share at a later date as well.
No, that's good. So sorry, I'll probably still need you.
Sorry.
Again, on forestry projects, sorry, which forestry projects, the expense went from 18,000 to 73.
So timber supply management, which is one of the line items in forestry projects that saw a significant increase, is our investment in ecosystem-based management planning primarily. So we have planning costs that go into block development, and that's encapsulated in the cost of goods sold when the logs are sold. Any planning costs that are over and above what's required to produce a log, where we're looking at inventories of species at risk, old growth management strategies, those things that are optional and above and beyond the cost to actually produce a log, but which often engage some of the same types of professionals. Those are costed to timber supply management. And then on recreation, that reflects largely access type maintenance. So where we're maintaining roads that we don't need to maintain to move logs, but we're maintaining those roads so that people can continue to access important recreation areas. That also includes some of the spending that offsets the grant revenue. The grant he referred to was for Big Trees site upgrades. And so we received a grant from Sunshine Coast Tourism with an agreement to project manage those upgrades that they didn't have the capacity to do. And so that part of that spending also, there was revenue that offsets it on that other line item.
Thank you. And just maybe, Sarah, if you just want to stay up for a second, I don't sure if I addressed this question to you. As part of my learning experience, it helps inform the budget as well as what would you say your biggest challenges were in 2022?
In 2022, I think the biggest challenge was really that, we had a new vision, a really significant vision of transformation. And we kind of came out of the gate swinging without really having resourced it adequately. So it's one thing to have enough money to pay for things, but you also have to be able to provide the oversight to the work being done and provide direction and have the staff capacity to handle that. And so that was something that really, it's been an incredibly challenging year for us. We love it. And, that's why we're doing it, but it definitely took a toll. So that would be I would say the challenges of 2022.
Yeah, I can see, certainly I want to certainly acknowledge all of the marketing and the communication pieces and the community engagement. You've done a lot around that and it's evident. Is there a way for you to sort of measure how that's working at this point?
We do a little bit. Some of the more particular measurables are website traffic, Instagram. Obviously, that's only capturing a particular segment. So some of the other things that we look at and keep track of when we're attending an event like an Earth Day Festival, which we missed this year, people come up and talk to us and we kind of keep notes about how many people came up and visited us, what were they interested in talking to us about, and then we also kind of roll that back into what we're putting out there. What are people interested in learning about from the community forest? What are they coming to us with? What are they trying to connect with us about? And so it's less tangible and objective, but when you go to an event and work a table and talk to 100 people over the course of the day, you really get a feel for how we're doing. And we do get a lot of really positive feedback. The communication. So thank you.
Great work. Thank you.
Okay, so hearing no other questions, I'll.
Thank you very much. So I would at this time then ask our directors to please take a motion to receive and accept the audited financial statements for the year embedded, or excuse me, for the year ended December 31, 2020. I'm sorry. Okay, somebody moved it. So I'd ask for a motion then to receive and accept the audited financial statements for year ended December 31, 2022, please.
I'll make a motion that we accept the audited consolidated financial statements of corporation for the year ended December 31st, 2022 be received and accepted.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. And so moved. And also ask for a motion, please, to appoint Crowe Mackay LLP as the auditor for the 2023 upcoming fiscal year as well, too, please.
I'll make a motion that we appoint Crowe and McKay LLP be appointed as the auditor for the corporation for the 2023 fiscal year.
Seconded.
Thank you. And so moved. So moving on to item 6 on our agenda, we have 2 directors who are ending their terms with us. This would be their last official AGM attendance. And I really can't express my gratitude to both of these individuals enough. There's a wealth of knowledge and experience and caring that comes with both these people. Elise Rudland, Elise, if you could stand, please. Elise has joined us on 2 separate occasions. She got dragged back a second time. So she was 2009 to 2014 and then 2018 to 2023 with a total accumulation of 10 years of service to the community and the Sunshine Coast Community Forest. And Elise. Thank you very much. And David King. David joined us in 2019. He's provided us 4 years of service, and David has been really just so profoundly helpful for me in particular, as I learned my way and fumbled my way through this process as well. And David was like my voice of reason that kept me from leaping off the cliff. So David, thank you so, so much for your years of service to us as well. We have good people and caring people on our board of directors who really care about the forest and care about where we're going with EBM and what our potential is. So it's a loss to see Elise and David move on to better and brighter things, but we also
If
yes,
I may, I just want to say thank you to Elise and to David on behalf of the District of Sechelt for all of the years that you've given us. And, you know, it's like Hotel California, you know, you always come back. So and I say, see you back here. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
thank you. And for both of them, I'd also ask if they would please do the honor of signing the checks. And these will be the dividend checks that will be going to the District of Sechelt. So we're going to have that process, which would be quite wonderful. So thank you very much. You too. Thank you. I'd like also to acknowledge our current directors. We have Dennis Lazinski, Bob Mitcher, I don't believe is here. He's recovering from knee surgery. Oh, there you are. Oh, there you are indeed. And myself as well. We have two more. Oh, good. We have Jordan Wilson. We have Gord Crandallmeyer, we have Bob Mitcher, we have myself. We're all in for another bit of time here. We have Jim Tybee, and who else did I miss? There you go. We have two new directors as well too coming on board, which is wonderful. I would like to ask for a motion to appoint our two new directors, as well as Gord Crandallmeyer and Jim Tybee as directors to the Sunshine Coast Community Forest for a 2-year term. Moving forward, please.
I'd like to make a motion that the following persons be elected to active directors of the corporation for a 2-year term. Greg Kaw, Doug Martinson, Gord Crandallmeyer, and Jim Tibby.
And second.
Thank you. And the motion is passed. Gord, are you back there? Gord here? Oh, no, Gord, I'm sorry. Greg Kaw. There you are. Could I ask you and Doug to stand up, please? Okay. Just to introduce, these are our two new directors and we're thrilled to have them. Okay, thank you. So, on that note, I'd like to continue on here. I do have a brief message from the chair, which I'd like to continue on with. For anybody who's just signed in via Zoom and is not familiar with who I am, my name is Kathleen Suddies, and I am the chair of the board of directors for the Sunshine Coast Community Forest. So 2022 was our first full year of taking the Sunshine Coast Community Forest ecosystems-based management from planning into action. It was hard work and boots on the ground. And early in the year, our board approved our strategic plan, which included a list of goals. And I'm really very, very pleased to share that we've made progress with almost every one of those listed targets. It was a ton of work. Everybody worked hard, and it's really quite profound that we've done that. We've invested in EBM planning, as the audit report indicated. And this planning builds on understanding of the condition of our ecosystems in our forests and identifies those areas having sensitive ecosystems and areas with species at risk. We've supported recreation and improved access to many popular areas. We've also met with experts and other community forests in order to explore our potential for future carbon projects. We've reprioritized community engagement. This was so important for us as we move forward. It was really, really just as powerful as moving with EBM. So with professional guidance, we've improved information and educational opportunities, and we continue building valued community relationships. We started the community advisory panel, and I'm very grateful to our CAP members for their collaboration and commitment to a positive future. Very, very proud of that. Internally, we've begun the work on our governance and organizational needs. We're ensuring that our policies that we have in place do support our vision and our values. That's critical. We've taken a hard look at what our organization needed to be sustainable, to support staff, and well, really to support our staff and our volunteer directors and our community advisory panel moving forward. And of course, the benefit of having a community forest is where all those surplus earnings are returned to community in the form of a legacy fund. And in 2022, Sunshine Coast Community Forest provided $525,890 to this fund. And since the inception of the legacy fund, over 1.4 million has come back to community and through grants and other likewise funding. So I do invite you to keep in touch with us. Visit our website, learn more about us, you know, how we manage old growth, how we do watershed protection, recreation, upcoming events. I mean, the events are incredible. We get to reach out to people like the Woodworkers Guild, and we have the Wood Expo, and there's so much that's coming. It's pretty exciting. And then sort of in closing, the community forest represents about 1% of all forestry operations on the Sunshine Coast. And this makes us very small. But I absolutely believe that the community forest can be something that the coast can be proud of. I profoundly believe this. And with your support, as we continue moving forward with our vision and we continue with EBM and we continue to identify future old growth, it's community relationships. It's about how we move forward with our vision and our values. And I know that Sarah and Warren hear me say this all the time, but we can be the mouse that roared. There's other places that are looking to us at what we're doing, and we're so small, but yet we're making a huge impact. And I'm just so proud of where we've come in the last 12 months and where we can go in the future. As bright as potential is huge. So I will stop now. And I will pass over the presentation to our manager. Thank you.
To the microphone, perfect. My name is Warren Hansen, and I'm the managing forester for here. Been here since 2021. You've heard many things about ecosystem-based management, and we've articulated that in many AGMs and community engagements. But I really wanted just to acknowledge that we've done a lot over the last in 2022, and Sarah reminds me we're in 2023. Don't talk about 23. I'm so excited about what we're doing in 2023. You know, it really was a time of firsts, and really engaging with our community and being able to do the little things, and really showing that leadership. And you know, we were picked up with the BC CFA, the British Columbia Community Forest Association, in their presentations about what we're doing with old growth and what we're doing with old growth management and what we're doing with our ecosystem-based management, as part of our acknowledgement to you know, making this community a better place. And really my focus was to, you know, bring our community back into our community forest, and our community is out there. They're firewood, they're collecting firewood all the time, they're recreating, they're using Fair Lake and their, you know, families, and so it really makes me proud to see our community going out there in our community forest. Everybody thinks that the community forest is everywhere, and that's the biggest thing is that we would love to expand. But we really had a kind of a year of firsts, and one of them was having Michelle Wells. And she was our first summer student, and really, you know, it really, as I'm born and raised here on the Sunshine Coast, and I was a summer student working for Canfor in the Port Mellon area, and really felt that, you know, we need to bring our young people into our forest, into our community forest, you know, to show, you know, what we're doing for forestry. So, you know, she worked with our forestry planning crews with Chartwell, and as well, she helped out with wildlife projects for restoration. She was involved with our community engagement activities over the weekend, and so she was instrumental. We also had a trail maintenance crew, and really that was our firewood crew. And you know how to and our firewood crew was a pilot project in 2021, and it was based out of the District of Seashort's operations yard, and we decided to move it over to an independent place that we'd be able to you know, really you know, bring the community to the firewood yard, being able to you know, store our material there, and bring our firewood crew, and then provide them steady, sustainable work. And you know, we felt that that was an important aspect of what this firewood program was designed to do. We also involved them in our trail maintenance during the hot weather. We had them go out and do brushing on some of these community trails, mountain bike trails, moto trails, and make our trails a lot better. They were involved with pulling up invasive plants, working with Half Moon Bay Broombusters. Is that it? Yep. Working around Rand's Pond and in around Fair Lake, and working with our community to you know, to attack the invasive species that we have, that we all struggle with. Well, and really, I just wanted to sort of you know, we do harvesting, and you know, that's always the message that we tell them. But we provide those community benefits back to you know, to the legacy funds and to our everyday operations. So we harvested 91,000 last year, or 9,100 last year, and 2.1 million meters of that was sold. We sell to local mills as first and foremost, if they can, you know, and we went from 25% in 2021 to 21% in 2022 for local mills, mostly because our local mill primarily cuts cedar, and our timber profile was primarily fir. So there was just mostly all cedar, whatever they took, any cedar that we produced, they accepted. So then the rest went to mills in the Fraser Valley. Terminal mainland mill, mostly for the Douglas fir. We sold 1,200 meters worth of poles that were destined. They were sold to Stella Jones in the Fraser New Westminster. They were designated to be hydro poles in North America and various places. And really, and all our harvesting was done with local contractors. So we pride ourselves on using local contractors for harvesting, scaling, dryland sorting, through the whole supply chain, and planting. And so we really emphasize that, you know, we our local contractors, and you know, thank you, one of them, for making our Ron McFarland over there, making our season, our 2022 a success. Yeah, so I'm not sure if this is going to work, but we're going to try. video. No? Okay, try it. No. Great. We're gonna have Lori gonna talk to us. So she's going to talk to you about biodiversity here on the Central Coast and our community and what she's kind of discovered and sort of her talk. But really, what this will help us. This is this is kind of like a snapshot of what our EBM kind of entails, and it's kind of a big Venn diagram. And so Lori is really helping us really define what this environment, this ecosystem-based management model is going to look like. And it involves economics and social well-being with our community, as well as protection of biodiversity ecosystem. And that's really an emphasis on what's happening, we've seen provincially. The logging of old growth forests, and so ecosystem, climate change, health, and biodiversity. Okay. This is something we're trying to look at and study and try to achieve. And so 2023, 2024 is going to be. Anyway, I'll leave Lori.
Pressing buttons. There we go. And then the second year was an in-person one and more about the details of how we were going to do EBM. You know, what makes up a landscape reserve, what makes up stand level retention. But this year, when they asked me to talk again, I went, oh, same stuff. So we're going to actually step back a little bit and talk more about why. So what do we mean when we're managing for ecosystem-based management? Like, what features are important and why are they important? What uses them? Why do we care about them? I thought we might have some kids in the audience, which we don't, but I can treat you like kids. So I thought it might be a little more interesting for them to hear about what creatures use what features that are important for biodiversity. So here we go. I've got about 50 slides in about half an hour. And if we get too rambly, we can cut it whenever. So I have to figure out how to do this. So first of all, a little bit of context, a little bit of repeat. There is no test on year 1 and 2, but there are some concerns in the lower elevations, especially of the community forest and the lower mainland and actually all the province. There's not much old growth left in the low elevations. That's because we've had a long history of harvest. It's very accessible for us. We also have a lot of people living on the low elevations. Agriculture, building cities, having our homes, right? So there's not a lot of old forest left. That's one of the public concerns that fosters EBM. And so the Sunshine Coast Community Forest has been thinking to increase levels of protection. And we've talked in previous years about this graph. I can't really point to things. Can I? Then I wouldn't be talking into this. That's fine. Thank you. Okay, so the community forest is trying to bump the level of protection up from essentially 0, because most of the augments are outside the community forest, a little bit inside, up to about 30%, right? It's not old forest now, but eventually maybe it'll become an old forest. And the last 2 years of talks were more about that. But this year,
Want to talk a little bit about not how we're developing these reserve ideas, which we are. And we can, anybody interested in the details, we can talk about the draft reserve ideas we have. This is a draft reserve network in the Wilson Creek area. So we are making progress on ideas, but I'm going to focus less on that and more on why. I want to talk about why we're thinking about stand level retention. Why do we care about big trees and dead trees? Why do we care about trying to make our forests look less like the big open patches and more like the ones that have some structure left inside of them? And usually I talk about big landscapes and then go down to the stand level, but today we're going to do it opposite. We're going to talk about stand features and then move up to the landscape. First of all, definition. So what is biodiversity? For all you little grade 7ers out there. It's the variety of life, right? We use a simple, there's lots of definitions, but we use a simple one. It's a variety of life and all its processes. So ecosystems, species, but also genes and gene flow. It all contributes to biodiversity. And why do we care about it? People write papers on this, but 3 main reasons. The big one is ecological. If you have all the pieces, things work better. They find that ecosystems with all their parts are more resilient to change. They can fight off climate change better. They're more productive. Forests grow better where there's more of their initial pieces are there. They can serve as blueprints. So when we manage areas, we can compare back to more natural areas to see how we're doing. Because we don't know everything when we're managing. And there's those moral values, that everything has a right to exist. That we want to be able to pass down to our kids, similar forests that we've experienced. And of course, the economic values of biodiversity, that biodiverse, rich systems support our consumptive use, our logging, salal picking, mushrooms, our non-consumptive use, like recreation, walking in the trails, and also allows for like unknown future uses, like discovering that yew has Taxol in its bark. Right? So keeping all the pieces is important. So let's start about what features are important for biodiversity to maintain what's out there and what they're important for. We're going to look at the stand level features first. The first 3 is kind of as a group, and then the next 3. So I always talk about, we want to maintain these main stand attributes in our forests, either in retention patches or around the outside. So let's look at some of them. Large live trees. Why do we care about them? Geez, I wish there were some kids here I could pick on. So we care about them for big things, big nests for eagles, big trees for pileated woodpeckers, but also for small things, little nuthatches, brown creepers that are picking their little insects out of bark that is heavily ridged and has many insects in it. Those big trees have big crowns that provide snow interception for deer, for elk. They don't have to be old trees to do that. They just have to be big trees. But sometimes big trees have to be old to do their natural role. So we have lichens that don't get going on big trees until their growth slows down. Right? So that lichen needs a slow growing bark to really get going. And those lichens are key food for deer when there is deep snow in winter, which isn't very often, not very long, but nonetheless, those lichens are important at times during the year for the big creatures. Lots of them also be on second growth, but some of the lichens just don't get going till a large tree is old. And large trees are the only things that become large dead trees, right? Large snags only come from large live trees. What do you think of when you think about a large snag? You think about cavity holes for big woodpeckers, right? That's the first thing that comes to mind. That's not the only thing we use is large live trees, right? Those woodpeckers that are building their big holes are called primary excavators, and they're building holes at the secondary, the little guys that can't hammer a hole use, like the western screech owl at the bottom. I hear. Tony, when's the last time we had a western screech owl here? They should be here. A long time ago. We have barred owls that are predating on them. That might be the problem. But, and what else? Like, what else uses cavities? Like there's a handful of seabirds, wood ducks, Barrow's goldeneye. Those also use cavities, either natural ones in where branches join or areas that woodpeckers have hammered them. So big snags especially are important. The chickadees will use something smaller and they also hammer their own hole. But not just birds, right? Think about birds automatically, but that's not the only thing. What else uses snags? Bears, even partway up a tree, right? Raccoons, other mammals like bats, right? Using either holes in snags, but more often behind the bark of a dead tree. And at the bottom of snags where bark accumulates, the little salamanders, right? Northwestern salamander. And snags are, conifer snags and hardwood snags are different. Deciduous trees often rot quicker, get heart rot earlier when they're alive. A lot of the birds like the deciduous snags. We have some lichens in the interior that only will predominantly grow on the leaning underparts of dead trees in very specific habitat niches. So dead trees are good for more than birds. Large trees and large snags, the only things that make large down wood. Okay? The little wood in the forest, it decays quickly. A couple of decades, the little stuff is gone. But the big downwood lasts for a rotation or more, 2 rotations, right? The little stuff doesn't. So the big downwood is important. What do you think about with that big downwood? Mosses, right? The ants, the insects have gone in, brought in fungi, it starts to rot, becomes habitat for mosses, but also they become nurse logs. When you see in a line of hemlock in the forest, where did it come from? Came from baby hemlocks growing on nurse logs that holds moisture, has nutrients, and that's where some trees get going. We get hemlock everywhere, but often the nurse log provides that initial growing conditions. And also vaccinium, I don't know if you can make it out here, but little huckleberry, red huckleberry, almost always growing on downwood, well-rotted downwood. And the saprophytes, little plants that aren't getting their energy from chlorophyll, they're decomposing downwood, or millipedes, lots of things using downwood. When a tree dies, its life is like half over. It supports so much as it's a snag and as it's downwood. And big downwood has roles not just as habitat, but in ecosystem processes like maintaining the stability of our stream sides. And you need big downwood to cross streams and help with bank stability. That's Gray Creek, the bottom. So those 3 are interrelated, right? You don't get large snags and large downwood unless you've got live trees. And retention patches that we leave in forests, these ones here, can then become large snags and large downwood. It's not safe to leave snags by yourself when you're harvesting, but you can leave large live trees. That's part of the reason we leave retention patches. Tell me if I'm too close to this or looking it up. Well, now let's talk about the next 3 stand level features here. They're not necessarily associated with mature old forests, shrubs, deciduous trees. They're very important components as well. Shrubs are our flowering shrubs provide the pollen and nectar. They provide berries for birds and for bears, that kind of thing. Our band-tailed pigeons are very closely associated with elderberries. They're eating the berries on the elderberry. That's a Bohemian waxwing there, eating the rose hips. We have lots of insects and butterflies that are also associated with that shrub layer. That's a red admiral butterfly. So not only is it using the nectar off the shrub layer, its larva, its caterpillar, is mostly almost 100% on stinging nettle. Right? So that's a butterfly that occurs throughout the northern hemisphere, and it only puts its caterpillars on stinging nettle. So not just having a shrub layer, but having every type of shrub is important. We have another butterfly, not here, but in the interior, Gillette's checker spot. It's only found like in Alberta, southern, eastern BC, Idaho, Montana, and it only puts its larva on black twinberry, right? Like, go figure, but very specific. And out in Porpoise Bay there a couple of weeks ago, looking at salmonberry blooms. So that salmonberry used by hummingbirds, berries eaten by bears. So those are things we think about with that important shrub layer. And often those shrubs are most abundant under deciduous trees or in gaps and canopies. And deciduous trees are quite different, hey, from our conifers. The leaves of deciduous trees are rich in nutrients and they get shed every year, right? We all know that. And that nutrition from those leaves builds a different kind of humus, a less acidic humus than under our conifer trees. And that less acidic humus supports quite different plants. So salmonberry you'll find also in conifer gaps, but things like false lily of the valley up here, bleeding heart, trillium white, trillium when it's old turns purple. Those things are more frequent, more abundant under deciduous canopies. Right? Part of it is because the deciduous trees let in light in the spring, and we call them spring ephemerals, right? They're flowers that get going while there's still sunshine under the trees. But part of it is a different soil composition. So those deciduous trees, they're often in the riparian zones that get naturally disturbed. They're also super important components to our ecosystem. And as I had said earlier, a lot of our birds are in those cavities using the heart rot that gets in there when the tree's alive in the deciduous trees. Pointing at the wrong thing. And sometimes creatures can use each element, no matter kind of what situation it's in. But for some, it's the mix, it's the heterogeneity of those habitats that's important. So having canopies with lots of layers, having spatial, like clumps of thick forest along with clumps of openings, that's important for a number of creatures. For example, Spot the owl, there's a screech owl, right? And it'll nest in riparian zones and then forage out into the opening. Deer, even in winter, right, go find their snow interception cover in the trees, but come out into the opening when the snow's not too deep and forage. So that intermix of closed forest and openings in fairly close proximity is important for several creatures. So that's all I'm going to say today about the stand structures and what uses them. But that's why, I hope I give you a taste of that's why each individual element is important. Now we're going to turn our thoughts to landscape issues. Maybe. Yeah, skip that, I just said. Let's think about landscape features. There's 3 I want to touch on for sure, and then there's another 3 if we have time and interest, if people aren't yawning. Ouch, yeah. So the first one I'll look at here is forest interior and edge, and then we'll talk about connections and riparian zone. So those are 3 I want to touch on for sure, and then we'll see if we go any further than that. Edges of forests. Different things happen in forests than out in the opening. Out in the opening, we have wind and heat and radiation, and it penetrates into the forest. And there's a mess of studies that talk about it penetrating like 200 meters, or maybe just 25 meters, or maybe 50 meters. And all kinds of, it depends on how exposed those edges are. If they're on south slopes and the sun is beating in, there's all sorts of things that affect how far these different abiotic influences go into the forest. There's also, although I don't have a graph for it, there's also predation that happens at forest edges. So jays, especially crows, they can penetrate other birds' nests that are in this edge area easier than they can in the interior of the forest. So we have creatures that do really well in forest interiors. We have creatures that do really well in forest edges, and lots that do really well in openings. But we're pretty good at making openings for the last while. So we're more concerned at the moment about creatures that need big patches of forest and forest interior. So I'd like to talk to you about a few of those creatures. Anybody know what that is? Yeah, this is a marble murrelet. Do we have them in the community forest? No. But we could. They actually like to be a little further away from the ocean, down inlets and whatnot. But this is a little seabird that goes way out to the ocean and fishes. And it comes back in and it nests on mossy, big mossy branches. It doesn't build a nest. It just puts its egg on the moss, on a big branch on a tree. And those mossy nest platforms are more successful if they're not at the edge of a forest. It doesn't seem to be so much about the temperature and wind as it is about predation by jays and crows. Okay. So they like to have bigger patches for successful nesting. And they obviously need some big old branches. About 18 centimeters will give a murrelet enough of a platform for them to nest in. It has to be high enough up that their babies can get out of the nest and start to remember how to fly before they hit the ground. So there's a certain size of tree. Then, oh, I thought I fixed this. Another bird that needs forest interior or is associated with forest interior is northern goshawk. Northern goshawks are a forest dwelling hawk. So they're not like their red tail that soars around in the open, not like an eagle. It's an under the canopy mostly hawk. And you can recognize it by its white eye stripe here and banded, really banded tail feathers. There's that white eye stripe there. And if they're sitting on a nest, if the young have fledged, not so much when they got eggs, but a little bit later, and you hear a really pissed off seagull in the forest yelling at you, it's probably a goshawk. Have we seen them in the community forest recently? Well, maybe, but it's been a while and not confirmed. But you look at the forests out there and you think we should have them. So they are usually using bigger patches of forest because they eat jays and grouse and squirrels. And they fly under the canopy. So I mean, they will go out into to the open and take ducks out of lakes too. But for the most part, they're under the canopy and they need those flyways. So if the forest is young and sticky with branches sticking out, it's not great goshawk habitat. But just about as soon as you want to harvest it, when it's kind of self-thinned and there's some openings, it becomes really good goshawk habitat. So we're always looking for them, but we haven't seen any nests or goshawks recently. And Tony, have any goshawk locations recently? Yeah. Yeah. So we expect to see them. Yeah. Yeah. They should be in Kinnikinnick too. They should be there. Yeah. So we expect that we will be, the community forest will be creating goshawk habitat or has goshawk habitat. The murrelet habitat's going to take a lot longer to develop, those big branches. It's not, those are the two things that people always cite as needing forest interior, but there's other creatures too. Like marten tend to be associated with bigger patches of forest. But even little things like the red-backed vole there, it's more often found inside the edge influence rather than at the edge in a forest. And even smaller things like some of our vascular plants, rattlesnake plantain, trillium, this pine sap, it's a saprophyte again that decays wood. They are slightly away from edge plants. So you don't find them doing very well right in that first 25 meters, but a little bit further in. And back when McMillan Bloedel, when Western was Weyerhaeuser was McMillan Bloedel, they set up a big study looking at edge effects. And they looked at little things. So they did studies that looked at the pattern of abundance of things. This is not any particular thing from a patch or contiguous forest out into the opening. And they looked at little things like spiders, for example. And here's the edge right there. Forest on this side, edge and opening. And there's lots of little things that do better further into the forest than they do out into the opening. Mycorrhizal fungi. Those, if you've read Suzanne Simard's book or talked about the mother tree, this network of fungi that help tree uptake nutrients, they are definitely more abundant at edges than they are further out into the harvest opening. Moss cover, as you can imagine, as that opening, as the forest becomes open, this is a 5-year-old clear cut, and this is the edge of the forest. The forest would go this way out into the opening, and very low amounts of moss cover. But an opening doesn't stay an opening forever. It grows up. And so as this grows up, this is now a 25-year-old opening and a 55-year-old opening. And the moss cover has jumped up. It's still a little bit less in the opening than at the forest edge, but it's recovering. So we have studies that show us that. That's why that preference for some creatures for forest interior and away from edge is why, when we talked about reserve networks for the community forest, that we have some parts that are big, call them hubs, right? So bigger hubs in the reserve network. There's also going to be these connections between the bigger hubs. So let's talk about connections. So to us, that kind of looks like a connected forest, right? It's got bands of forest meeting other bands of forest. And the idea is that the concept is that individuals and populations need to be able to move between patches of habitat to interact with each other, to breed, for populations to have gene flow in between them. But really, like, we have to think about it. Like, what is a connection? Depends on what you are, right? Like a connection for a bird, they can go long distances, no problem. Doesn't matter really what our logging looks like. But a connection for a mouse or a beetle might be something quite different. Might just be, hey, if you've got enough down wood, I can scurry along beside it and I'll get through the clear cut and go to the other side. The connections of forest, right? The connections in this kind of picture, what are they important for? They could be important for Sasquatch, right? If they were around and need to hide from people. But mostly what we're concerned about here is the slow moving small things that can't go very far. So like your lichens, where they have, for them to move, for them to adapt to climate change, for example, they have to get to another tree, establish, create spores, and gradually move as they live. So those forest connections are really most important for small, slow dispersing things. In our forest, riparian zone are an important area that serve as connections. So riparian zones, you think about them, what are they important for? Well, fish, for sure. And so the shade and the water quality and water flow are important for fish. And also we obviously think of other things important in wet areas like the amphibians, the frogs, and the salamanders. Anybody know their frogs? It's a hint. So a red-legged frog used to be listed as blue listed, like vulnerable, and now it's uplisted to yellow. So it's not as much concern nowadays. A couple of salamanders, long-toed salamander and a northwestern salamander, all important in those riparian areas. But bigger things, Pacific water shrew there, least weasel. These are things that use those riparian zones as hunting zones, but also just places to move. So those are the three main ones I wanted to talk about. Are we ending now at 7:30 or do I keep going? What's the general vote? You want 10 minutes more or not? I won't be offended. Okay. All right. So when we're making a reserve network, mostly we're thinking about forest interior, connections, riparian zones, but then there's some other features that we also think about. So let's just rip through those. 10 slides left. We have mapped here and throughout BC what we call red and blue listed ecosystems. We have red and blue listed species, but we have red and blue listed ecosystems. Red are endangered. Blue are vulnerable. And they tend to be on the Sunshine Coast, in the community forest, these kind of wet areas, Sitka spruce, salmonberry, red cedar, spruce, skunk cabbage. But also because of the lack of old forests, there's some really basic ones. Red cedar, sword fern, cedar, hemlock, deer fern. They're listed ecosystems, red or blue. And so when we have this draft reserve network that we want to take out to Shell and to the public and see what you guys think about it. Well, that's just an example of wet stuff. Lots of our listed ecosystems are wet. But here's a map of the red listed ecosystems. Now, the best examples are old. That'd be the dark red stuff here. Not many of those left. So we also looked at those ecosystems that aren't quite old, right? They're 140, 120 years old. And we've looked at where those are and tried to incorporate them in the reserve network. And we've done the same thing. I totally needed that. That's good. No, it's good. Same thing with the blue listed ecosystems, like the darker blue are the older forests. You can see it's up here in the mountain hemlock high elevation, but some is lower down. And then the blue listed ecosystems that really aren't in their peak condition, they're not old yet, but they're getting there, are this paler blue. And so we're trying to capture a good swack of those in our reserve now. But also we have a few other things. We have winter ranges for deer and for elk. We want to capture some of those in the reserve network. Now, we don't have any designated under the winter ranges. The province has legal winter ranges, but there are none in the community forest. But there is a model that is not really accessible yet, except for I know the folks that made it. So we know where some of the winter ranges are for deer, and it's not really rocket science. The deer like to hang out where the snowpacks are shallow, so that's low elevation, southwest aspect, and slope. Slope will shed the snow quicker than flat. And they need lots of food. And the rock outcrops with lichens are part of that food source. And if there's some openings in the forest, that's good. Don't need a solid forest. The deer like to forage in the open, have some security cover and some cover from sun in the summer, but the snow interception cover tends to be fairly complicated forest. So on those southwest slopes, some rock outcrops, a mix of dense canopy and openings, that's the best thing. Because in winter, what are they eating? They're still going into your yard and eating stuff. But when it's really snowy, they'll be under the canopy eating actually conifers, right? The low branches on the conifers, eating the tall shrubs, the huckleberry and the salal if they have to. It's not great, but the huckleberry is good. And in desperate times, the lichens, the electoria that falls onto the snow, and they'll be eating that. And in some winters, it's been a super important food source. In the spring, they eat a whole ton more stuff, but we won't talk about it. And then the other ungulate that we are concerned about here on the coast are doing rather well are the elk. And they're not always in your garden. In natural situations, they will be wintering in the forest. So in the summer, you might find them in non-forested wetlands, and in some areas with a more elevation range, they'll go up to open meadows and slides. But in the winter, you'll tend to find them in these riparian areas, or sometimes areas with rock outcrops. Because in the winter, you won't be able to see this, but if you look at the white part of these pie graphs, it is talking about their food. This is spring, lots of grasses, not very much of that white conifer. This is winter, mostly eating conifers and shrubs. Elk are grazers, right? They would prefer to be eating grass. Deer are browsers. They like eating the huckleberry, but elk, if they could get it, would be on grass. But in the winter, those wet forests are their prime habitat. So I'm trying to capture a few of those winter ranges. And then some very specific features that you don't capture in a coarse filter. You kind of just got to know where they are. So bear dens. You got any bear dens, Warren, or did Warren disappear somewhere? Oh, there you are. Got some bear dens. Are they all basal dens? Because sometimes bears will nest way up there. And this is a mama and a cub here and a cub there in West Sechelt a couple of weeks ago. So when we're protecting dens, sometimes Forest companies will leave one tree in the middle of a clear cut. And that will work for years for male bear. They'll come back and use that den. But for females, they want to have other trees around so they can send their babies up usually when males come by. Right? So males are kind of nasty to their own or other kids, other bears, cubs. So they want to have more than one tree to den in. Heron rookeries, I don't know if you've got any of these. Sometimes our herons are in big masses, like they'll have many trees with many nests, but sometimes it's just a tree or two. So that's something to keep an eye out for and include if we find them. And of course, the nests of other raptors as we notice them. So eagle nests, red tails, sharp shins, but even the owls, if we knew where they were, we would try and include that in stand level or landscape level reserves. So that's it. We talked about our landscape things. We talked about our stand thing. So hopefully it's given you a little bit of a sense of when we talk about what we're trying to incorporate, that there's actually biology behind some of those issues. And that's it. And I promise you, I won't talk to you next year. You get a new face.
Thank you, Lori. And just two things actually I want to add. And Lori, first of all, is one of those experts that advises us and works with us and provides us with, as you can see, incredibly valuable information. And I want to thank Lori for her presentation. The presentation on the biodiversity was a beautiful presentation on the complexity and the elegance and the value and the wisdom of the forest, which then now leads me to also really sincerely and importantly acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Community Forest functions completely within the traditional homelands of the Seashell Nation. And that everything that we are striving to do, we hope will be in harmony with that vision as well too. So we do have time for Q&A. And I don't know if we have any questions from the audience or from Zoom before we end our meeting. Are there any questions? All right. No questions? Okay, well, on that note, then I would, Tony? The CAP program, thank you, Tony. Yeah, the CAP program is our community advisory panel. And we have just literally kicked it off. I might get Sarah to come up with a finesse about the number of members that we have on board with that, but they're meeting monthly. They are a subcommittee with terms of reference with which that they function. They are a group of diverse community members with background in environmentalism and forestry and I'm just trying to think, John is here. John is the chair of the CAP and I might even ask you to address any other questions, but we're just started with that. The CAP is free to examine community forest policies and ideas and things that we're planning on doing and has the freedom to make recommendations and criticisms and alternative plannings and have a strong empowered dialogue back and forth. And I think moving forward, I'm very proud of the hard work that's come together to make this group cohesive and get started out the gate. And I have high hopes for its sustainability and its future as we move forward and grow and as the CAP grows. John, did you want to say a few things about CAP? You want to come to the mic though, so that everybody out. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to echo what Catherine said, it's a new group, but it's a wonderful endeavor on behalf of the community forest. We've got 6 or 7 people on our panel with a wide background, working with the professionals in the community forest. We're looking forward to being a big asset help. Thank you.
Anything else? Are we quiet? If it doesn't work, we go back to the drawing board. I'm sorry, because I missed the very beginning of your comment of what, West Town, is that what you said, West Hill Sound? Oh, Clawfoot Sound. I can't speak to Clawfoot Sound. I'm sorry. I don't have, I think that for us here in the community forest, we have the advantage of our size. What we're doing, we believe is the right thing to be doing, despite the fact that we're very small. As a community forest, we can be more agile. We do work with, you know, our technical teams do communicate regularly and work with the Seashell Nation moving forward. We have the ability, we have potential that we can be more agile. We can learn from everybody who's gone before us, and that's what we're doing as well. We're taking the best of what's been done. We're trying to be creative and innovative as we move forward. We know that this is a living organic process. EBM for us is the foundation for us to move forward as an understanding. When we look at these biodiversity pressures and when we look at what we've got here on the Sunshine Coast compared to what Blackfoot Sound had, we have no real old growth here. We need to make it again. We need to be proactive and responsible for our forests that we're responsible for here. And so because of the uniqueness of our geographic location, because of the uniqueness of our biodiversity here, because we're an urban forest, we have different realities. You know, we could, compare ourselves to the Great Bear Rainforest as well, too. Look at the difference between the Great Bear Rainforest and perhaps what you perceive as the failure of Clawfoot. They're different regions with different realities. And what we're doing here is we are making every effort to make a made on the Sunshine Coast, EBM-based values and vision, community forest that gives back to the community 100%, involves community, involves Seashell Nation, and empowers us all. And are we going to make mistakes? Absolutely. Have we made mistakes? Absolutely. But we can learn from that and we can re-examine. We can do the hard look and say, where did we screw that up and how do we fix that? We've got CAP helping us. We've got people like Lori helping us. We've got, input and vision from community at large and the nation. So I think that to compare to something like Clawfoot Sound is an apple and an orange, and I think that because we're a community forest, we have that flexibility, we have that agility. Lori? Hmm. Yep. And to promote those other values. And that's, when we look at, the visions and the hard work that Lori and her team do to provide us with everything from different ways of harvesting to making those connections in our wildlife corridors. It all adds up together and it will make, I think for us, a better forest moving forward. 30% is where we're trying to go for. And you know, I mean, I'll bring Warren into the conversation to talk about the viability of that, but I think that for us, is it wordsmithing? Yeah, I'm not a forester, you know, I rely on the expertise of the people that come and provide us with their level of expertise, with Warren's ability to manage our forest and with what community wants. And I think that's really important, you know, and I think we can do this. I do believe that we can manage for that 30%. We can have that biodiversity. We can maintain under a community forest model, we can do it. And to assume that we're going to fail, I think we're going to look different. I think we're going to have peaks and valleys. Are we going to be snuffed out of existence? I hope not. That's not my intention. I don't think it's any of our intentions. We all want this to succeed. All of us that are on this team want this to succeed. Community, I hope, wants us to succeed because I think that as a community forest, we've got our surplus coming back to community. We're seeding ourselves again. We're reinvesting in our forest. We have to, if we do nothing, then we're going to fail. But they were there before you were there as a young boy. So yeah, absolutely. But the thing is what we do is we have added pressures now. We have climate conditions that we all were unaware of 60 years ago. We have to deal with watershed concerns. We have to deal with species at risk. We have to protect and nurture so that we can have something in the future. And I think that's the key. I think that it's the uniqueness of our geology and our geography, and it's the uniqueness of our forests, our climate zone that we have here, and it's new pressures. It is new pressures that we're all facing. Everything from invasive species to species at risk. And so that's part of our responsibility as a community forest moving forward and representing and being alive to community values and wishes. And because we're small, we can be flexible. We can be creative. We can roll with the punches. The logs that we harvest, we sell locally. We can reinvest in added value. We can, and yes, it's wordsmithing because I'm not a forester, but this is what I see when I sit as the chair of our board of directors, and I see the passion, and I see the care, and I see the expertise, and then I see what community brings and what community wants and how we move forward. And I think we have a future, and I believe in that. I really do. I think the community forest can do it. Yeah.
Yes, there is a question in the online Zoom chat. The question is from a Jonathan Weintraub. What mistakes have you made?
You know, I came on the board of directors initially in 2019, and it was a steep learning curve. And the community forest, like any organization and any entity, we all stand on the shoulders who come before us. And you know, I mean, for mistakes, you know, moving forward, I mean, I think for us in my term that I can look at, I think that community engagement was a critical one that we dropped the ball on, and we had to make amends for that. that was a critical component. We needed to be listening to our community more and getting out there and hearing what people needed and wanted as we move forward. Mistakes, learning, it's all learning. Everything is a learning process. Everything is recognizing if something didn't work out the first time, then you do a postmortem on it. You take a look at it, you see what failed and where we can improve and how we move forward. And sometimes it's hard and sometimes it's something that you don't want to face, but I think we've been really fortunate that, really, I think our biggest thing has been capacity so far moving forward and under my sort of tenure with all of this and our community engagement and turning that ship. It's like turning a freighter, going from one model to a new model. But I think that that's critical that we've been doing that. And it's critical that we move forward. So mistakes, there's a million of them, I'm sure, probably. Okay.
There are no further online questions.
I can't remember what the question was. I'm curious to know what the district of Sechelt is planning to do with all the monies that they've been receiving over the years from the community forest. I'm not aware of what you've been spending that money on.
I think the short answer for both of us who are both new counselors is that we don't know. We're just assuming it goes into general revenues and it's supporting,
However, and just to add to that, I think that's a question that we will ask and definitely get back to you.
Actually, I think Sarah could probably really quickly give you a Coles notes on where that goes.
Sure. Just very briefly, just for the sake of everyone else as well, that it's a good question. Thank you, Jane. The District of Sechelt has a bylaw that governs the legacy fund called the Sunshine Coast Community Forest Legacy Fund, and it does have certain stipulations. So it is held in a segregated fund from general revenue at the District of Sechelt and goes out in grants for community benefit is approximately the wording of that. And those decisions are made in public meetings at council. So for the most part, that's the answer. There's a small amount of nuance to it, but that's for the most part how the funds have been spent. It's either out in grants or sitting in the segregated fund.
Okay, so it is 7:58, and I think unless we have more questions at 8 o'clock, I think we've probably abused everybody significantly. Tony? Yeah. So the annual allowable cut as it unfolds will basically be determined by our tenure assessments and our EBM as we move forward. Does that answer that? The work in progress. It's a living thing. Yeah. Okay. So on that note, because it is 8 o'clock, I would ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
to adjourn the meeting.
Second that.
And so moved, Ben. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.